Back WNST after a magnificent trip to Cincinnati. I mean, even the chili tasted good at halftime somehow for me out there. I've certainly had some long drives back to Louisville and Dayton and Columbus and Indianapolis, and it was a joyous a ride for me. But on the other end of that, there is a beaten Cincinnati Bengals press troop there dealing with the after effects of pretty much a butt kicking. Paul Dehner covers all things Bengals. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Paul Dehner JR. That's for the junior part. He's also at Cincinnati.com and the longtime beat writer for all things Bengals and the men of Marvin. Paul, what the hell was that, dude? I know you're still trying to make sense of it, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Bengals coaches that are kind of looking at each other saying that exact phrase today, trying to figure out what that was, what it means, and if we're already talking about the season being a lost one after one game.
Well, I mean, that's the nature of the beast, right? When you lose a division game at home to a rival in an ugly fashion, you can't put points up, you can't protect your quarterback, you can't run the ball. I don't care who you're playing in a league. That's not a good recipe.
No, there's an interesting thing about this team was very young. They really reformed the roster. They went from being the 23rd youngest team in the league to the third youngest team in one offseason. They had a lot of youth there, and there was a lot of questions of what are they going to look like with Andrew Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler gone off that offensive line. They have some other veterans left. There's sort of a new personality that needs to take shape. And what it was a team rudderless, without any personality, and really without any sense of killer instinct at all. And then you throw an awful day from Andy Dalton on top of it, and they look like a team that you wonder if they're capable of getting back to mediocre anytime soon. Because if that's the type of performance you put out there on an opening day, maybe you just don't have enough talent or cohesiveness or whatever it is to be competitive in this league. It's too tough.
Well, look, man, I've seen a lot of things in Cincinnati, but I haven't seen Marvin exit yet. I know there have been 2 or 3 opportunities where, I think he believed he was exiting, and maybe the Brown family believed he was exiting, but it certainly hit me as I rolled out Route 74 westbound toward Indianapolis to see the 4 Irish lads on Sunday night. And I talked certainly with Luke, and you're the Cincinnati guy, and I know, you keep a nice professional relationship with Marvin, who I think everyone agrees is a good human being if you know Marvin Lewis. But, it's been a long time, and I don't know that this is the project for him right now. I mean, it certainly didn't look that part on Sunday.
No, and after the game, he called it as disappointed a game as he can remember. And, because I think he has high expectations for what this group is and what their baseline is for jumping off with, and did not think it would be that. But now as far as his future, the one thing that's different this year that can not be denied regardless is that this is the first time since 2010 he does not have a contract beyond this season. So whether that's from his side, whether that's from the Brown family's side, regardless, the bottom line is he does not have a contract, so outs are there. And clearly I think maybe that type of a pressure is good. Maybe that's the type of thing that some of the coaches and even maybe Marvin himself need for this team. So, there's certainly there's no security at this point, and what happened on Sunday doesn't help that either.
Well, let's say you go problem by problem. We've had this offensive line sieve thing going on here the last couple of years where it's been problematic. They can't run the ball. Flacco can't get protected. There have not been great skill position players around here for a number of years on the back end of Ray Rice. And so we've seen that story where you have to throw the ball 50 times because you're behind by 2 touchdowns or because you just can't run the ball and you're in 3rd and 13 all day, which is not a good spot to be. For the Bengals O-line and for all that they've put into building it. It doesn't happen overnight, not with young players. I mean, we see that with Ronnie Stanley here, and certainly even Marshall Yanda many, many years ago developed into this stalwart guy that the Whitworths and the Zeitlers were. Why did they part ways? Did they think those guys were too rich, too old, that they could build it cheaper, better from underneath? Because I think there has been some questions like, should they have retained those guys?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt looking at, I mean, you couldn't look at a team that gave up 41 sacks last year and got rid of its two best players and said that it wasn't going to take a huge step back. And the deal with Kevin Zeitler was they were not going to be paying a guard that much money. They don't believe in making that position one of the biggest taking up, salary cap percentages hits. That's just not a thing that they choose to do or believe in. So that was the Kevin Zeitler position, and they knew that he was going to reset the guard market when he hit it, and he did. He got $60 million from Cleveland. So that's that side. The Whitworth one is really the one where they're more on the hook for, that they're sort of left holding that bet slip in their hands right now. And that was allowing Andrew Whitworth to leave. They could have tagged him. They could have paid him a lot of money. He's going to be 35, and while he has played well for a long time, he doesn't look any bit of 35. They put a first-round pick on Cedric Ogbuehi in 2015 because they thought he could be a left tackle of the long-term future. And if they were to keep Whitworth around, Ogbuehi would continue to not play, and then his contract would run out without this team ever really knowing or ever really giving him a chance. And they didn't want to not give Cedric Ogbuehi a chance to prove that he is a first-round pick that they believed he was. They put their chip on him. They put a giant bet on him by allowing Andrew Whitworth to test the market. And when the market came back and said, you're worth $36 million over 3 years, the Bengals couldn't go there. They certainly weren't going to go there on the year's end of it. And so they said, we're putting our bet down on Cedric Ogbuehi. The problem being, he was so bad last year at right tackle, got benched mid-season, and was a real liability that I don't know what kind of bet that really was. If you couldn't know for 1 year that maybe this guy won't be able to hack it in this league. And from what we saw yesterday, when Terrell Suggs, as you know, in a month will be 35 himself, looked like a young Terrell Suggs. He looked like Terrell Suggs from when Marvin first got to Cincinnati, tearing Cedric Ogbuehi up. And, so he's got to be better than that. And really, you're exactly right. The bottom line is the Bengals are standing there holding their Cedric Ogbuehi bet slip. And I think at this point, at least early on, you can see their horse is not exactly in the league.
Paul Dehner Jr. covers all things Bengals out in Cincinnati for the Cincinnati Enquirer. You can follow him out on Twitter at Paul Dehner. That's DEHNERJR out on Twitter, as well as at Cincinnati.com. All right, so you brought up Terrell Suggs, and, for me here, I've been doing this a long time, Paul. I mean, Suggs is not my favorite player. I think anybody that knows me sort of knows that. I've been very shocked, at these comebacks after these injuries. He's now with Sunday for me, and this is, the first time I've discussed this sort of openly. You better start talking about Canton for him, right? And what Steve Smith did around here the last couple of years, I think sort of added that gold star, that extra thing that would bring him into that conversation. I think Suggs certainly could, was going to get into the room and be talked about anyway because he's been that kind of a player. But that kind of a performance on Sunday in that environment, on the road, at this age, with him looking more like Elvis Dumervil, looking more like a smaller player, I just got to tip my cap to him. He's a hell of a football player, man. Yeah, and he has been for a long time. The fact that he's still doing it right. I mean, I think people have been counting him out for a number of years now, assuming that the end had happened. Well, those injuries usually indicate that, right? I mean, literally. Right. I mean, Achilles on 285-pound frames at 32 and 34. I mean, it's almost miraculous, quite frankly, right? Yeah, no, it's the last thing that you think. I mean, it's Father Time is undefeated, and usually so is the Achilles. That's kind of
it's kind of what you see for almost anybody in this league. For him to be out there still doing it is remarkable. And yeah, you're right. I mean, you look at the length and the high quality of his career, and I absolutely think Canton is going to be in his conversation going forward. Who knows with what happens in that room when the discussions start? There's a lot of guys that aren't in there that probably should. But you put his career up to, say, a Jason Taylor who just went in, it's very favorable that Terrell Suggs could also have his bust in Canton one day.
But I guess my point is he could have walked away 2 years ago. I mean, Ogden did enough and kind of walked away when he started to hurt. And you either feel like you did enough. I mean, obviously Ed Reed and Ray Lewis, they don't go to bed at night wondering. They're just, they got it marked on their calendar, kind of, sort of. Suggs isn't that guy, but Lodi Nada would be another guy that, could have been in that conversation for a period of time, but didn't have that next gear after 30. Steve Smith is a guy who had that next gear. Boy, we're seeing this next gear with Suggs, and to your point, I don't know that it's going to look this way in Week 12 or when we see Cincinnati later on in the year when you guys come in here, but for one day and a burst, you can say Abwehi maybe not all that, but that was an impressive. It was an impressive performance all the way around from the Ravens defense.
Yeah, I will say from the Bengals' perspective, you do wonder if it wasn't the fact that the left tackle across from him was pretty poor. But there's four. I mean, there's four left tackles all over this league that you take advantage of when you hit that age, and you can still be effective doing so, even just with your savvy, which I think he's probably would admit himself he's doing more with savvy now than anything else. He certainly showed a lot of it chasing down Andy Dalton on that strip sack yesterday. That was part of the game changer. And even if the ball went right off his helmet, to be in position and be right there and make a play, really 3 to 4 of the biggest plays of the game were courtesy of Terrell Suggs.
Yeah, tip, strip, sack, all that good stuff. Paul Dehner joining us here from Cincinnati and the Inquirer there. So, give me your little cheat sheet for concerns this week. I mean, did you predict that they were going to win? I mean, just as an aside, did you think the Bengals were going to somehow win at 30-20 and play a pretty good game on Sunday?
I thought it was going to be a slop fest, and I did think the Bengals would win by I had 14-13. I think I thought that the one thing that went off of what I was anticipating was I don't think anybody was anticipating Andy Dalton having one of the worst games of his career. The game is completely different if he doesn't throw so many ill-advised passes, really uncharacteristic of him. I mean, last year, he had one game with more than one pick. He had 2 picks against Buffalo. That's it. He was as good. His interception rate was a career low last year. He was as good in protecting the football and not making silly throws as we've seen in his career. And to come out the first week and just make poor throw after poor throw and bad decision, that was the one that was sort of off the charts of what you thought would happen. If he plays a normal Andy Dalton game, it's obviously very different. I think it probably is more of that, 14-10 type of game. I think the Ravens still win because they were the better team yesterday, but it's a different score. But yeah, so that was my thought going into it. They certainly need to find a way to protect Dalton, give him some time, and help get him back on the right track right now. That would be on the top of my list of things they need to do. It's the cohesion, but on this offense between line and quarterback.
Well, and then you take Burfict off the other side, take Pac-Man out of the equation as well. Some thoughts about the Burfict thing. You've been there through all of this. You were there, for the whole Steeler fiasco. You were there reporting on transgressions off the field that led him to be available to Marvin and to the Bengals. And, you're there when they drafted Joe Mixons, and you were there when it was who they going to arrest next, and all of the nonsense and the chicanery that's going on around there. But, I guess when you take him out of the equation defensively, maybe they are a 4 or 5 win team this year if he doesn't play at all, right?
Yeah, he's a game changer. I think the one thing about Vontaze Burfict as a player is this year he came in as motivated, focused, in as good of shape as we've seen from him, and that's been an issue with him over recent years. It's taken him a while to get, whether partially because of suspension, but then partially because of conditioning, focus, motivation, whatever you want to call it. It's taken him a long time to really get himself into his peak perfect. He showed up at peak perfect this year. He was as good this preseason and in camp as I've probably seen him in his career. And that's why there was so much frustration over the suspension that happened to him, because it really stole a whole lot of momentum. And he really was going to be a playmaking game changer type out there. They're a very different defense with him playing at his top. And they need that. They're clearly going to need that this year to overcome some of the other deficiencies. They're going to need him to come out and be a all-pro, Pro Bowler type, and that won't start until week 4. That's part of what comes with 55. That's part of what comes with him is the second he does anything wrong, or even that lingers on wrong, the hammer's going to come down and it's going to be swung with force because of repeat offender.
He is Paul Dehner. He is a repeat offender here on WNST in Cincinnati. We get together a couple times a year and chat. You still doing the Bengals Beat podcast, Paul?
Yeah, we're still doing the Bengals Beat podcast in season twice a week, but once a week all year.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, for where you're going with this thing and the sort of relative ugliness on the other side, we did get up to, have eyes up the road at what's going on with Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and it doesn't feel like Pittsburgh's going to win 14 games this year based on that effort, right? And maybe Cleveland's getting a little better. I mean, maybe this is one of those everybody's between 6-10 and 9-7 kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Steelers are probably still the class of the division. You never know how those things will break, and they're so often affected by injuries up there, whether it be Roethlisberger or Le'Veon Bell. We'll see if those guys can survive a full season. Their defense appears to have come around, and maybe they did find something pretty nice in T.J. Watt. So I think Pittsburgh has a step up on most. But after watching yesterday and what you guys have been watching all preseason, you can argue maybe the best single entity in this division is the Ravens' defense. If their offense can find a way to catch some rhythm and momentum, you certainly can like what you have with the Ravens. That's for sure.
Well, we're feeling ourselves right now, Paul. We got Cleveland coming in here this week. That's nice. We got a little trip to London next. We're going to have some fish and chips and drink a pint or 3. Hey, you've made that trip, haven't you?
We did last year. We went last year.
Give me a little primer, because I mean we're going to have 20,000 of us going over. I'm taking 100 people over. We're doing a big gathering in East London. We're going to drink some beer and eat some fish and chips. Then we're going to take the Emirates Air cable car across the River Thames to the O2 Arena. Sort of a little purple march thing we're going to do over there. So that's our mojo. But give me a little London experiential thing going on.
It was cool. I loved it actually. With the bye week after, my wife came on the trip, and then we ended up, after spending the weekend in London, we went to Paris for a few days, which is a great thing to do. You can just take the train all from London straight over all the way. It's like a 2.5-hour ride down, and you're right there in the middle of Paris. That was an incredible trip. It's really easy to turn into a more lengthy vacation that way. There were a lot of Bengals fans I know that did an Ireland connector where they went up early and did a few days in Ireland and then came around and loved it. And certainly once you get into London, there's so much to do. The city is so big and it's so easy to get around on the tube that you could do. We had a giant get-together. They had a bar down in Trafalgar Square, which is right downtown London. We were at the Admiralty. It's really awesome. It was one of my favorite things of all year last year was watching all the fans that had made the trip over gather and come together and have kind of a big party. It was one of my favorite things of all of last year, just to kind of be around and see that and kind of the fun, pride, and enjoyment of that trip, because it really is it's an awesome trip for those that are willing to put out the money to do it.
Well, we're taking some folks next week. We're really looking forward to it. We're flying out on Tuesday, and I'm taking you up on your Paris. My wife and I went over to scout the trip 2 months ago, and we loved it. And the guy that saved my wife's life, Niels, is coming over. He's got his Ravens jersey on. My son and his wife are going. So, yeah, we're looking forward to maybe doing the family affair, like walking Abbey Road, like four dorks that we are, you know what I mean, and taking the snapshot. So we're all into it. Hey, man, sometimes the chili's better than others. You know what I mean? I don't know what to say, bro, but I always love coming into Cincinnati, and if Marvin is no longer there anymore, it won't affect our friendship, Paul.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great to have you guys, and thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure. Paul Dehner Jr. joining us here, Bengals beat writer and video host for the Cincinnati Enquirer. You can find him at Paul Dehner. That's DEHNERJR for Junior out on Twitter. And Cincinnati, or as Earl Weaver always said, Cincinnati.com, where I did not spend the night in Cincinnati. I spent the night in Indianapolis, but I've spent many lovely nights in Cincinnati, but I've never had an afternoon quite like a Sunday. That was a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie. 20-0. That little British thing sliding in there, that just grooved in there. Nil. Did you like that? Yeah. 20-0. Over the Bengals, and now the Browns are coming in this week. Luke's going to be on the backfields all week. Obviously, we're still doing the Requiem for the Orioles around here as well. You can find anything you miss in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. Our morning newspaper delivers to your email inbox digitally, free, easy, sign up once. It all comes to you every morning. 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, and they're always judgment-free, so step into PlanetFitness.com. Our tech service breaks news. Obviously, we got Ravens injury news. It's going to be happening all week here, right on up to the starting lineups at 1 o'clock on Sunday when the Browns come in. Get on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5. Driving you home, it is the SSV on WNST. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you on Wednesday night, we will be gathering at Greenmount Station in Hampstead. Delicious crab cakes, great cheer, good fun. We'll say hello to Chris and all the gang up there and all the sports and rock and roll memorabilia on the walls. We're going to have Ryan Jensen starting center and starting right tackle Austin Howard with us. We will be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero and talking about victory. Victory. And hopefully a 3-0 start. Cross my fingers. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.